I woke up to a quiet rustle. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then the sound came again. A creak, like someone tiptoeing carefully. I squinted to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. In the doorway stood my son, Jake. He froze, leaning forward slightly, as if deciding whether to go in next or run back to his room. "Jake, what's wrong?" I asked, sitting up on the bed. Sleepy, I tried to squeeze out more concern than annoyance. He looked strange, pale, his eyes focused somewhere near my feet, not on me. I, heard a noise, somewhere on the street. "Scared me," he said, looking away. I wondered if he'd been on his phone again, and now fantasies were taking over. I found him several times before at 2 a.m., with headphones and a TikTok. "It's okay. It's just the wind or the cat. Come on, I'll walk you to your room," I said, but he remained standing as if waiting for something. The silence in the room became palpably heavy. Finally, Jake nodded briefly, turned around, and walked out. I sat in complete silence for a few minutes, trying to quiet my heart again. Back in bed, I figured I'd talk to him in the morning, but I was really hoping he was just worried about tests or some stupid teenage drama. That's where I stopped. At least, that's how it seemed to me at the time. In the morning, I was making coffee, trying to get my mind on things. Jake was already sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal, silently picking at it with a spoon. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting down across from him. He shrugged, not looking at me. "You said you heard a noise yesterday. Is it still disturbing?" I asked cautiously. "No, it's fine." He cut me off and rose quickly, taking his plate to the sink. It wasn't like my son. Usually he was happy to share some random detail of the day, even if it was something small, like someone tripping funny on the stairs at school. And now I felt like he was hiding something. I got home earlier than usual in the afternoon. We had one of our office meetings canceled. Jake was supposed to be here in half an hour, so I decided to clean up the living room. A vacuum cleaner, a couple stacked books on the table. But then I noticed his backpack lying by the door, unusually heavy, like for school books. Something compelled me to open it. Inside, I found a stack of papers and some strange drawings that clearly weren't Jake's. But most importantly, a picture. It was me. But not an old school picture or a snapshot from the family album. It was something else, taken recently, maybe a couple weeks ago. In the photo, I was with one person, a name I'd rather not say. It was a man with whom I had, how shall I put it, over before the divorce. My heart quickened. Jake couldn't have accidentally found that picture because I'd never printed it. Anxiety began to slowly envelop me. Something had clearly gone wrong. In the evening, I decided to talk to Jake after all. The picture had been on my mind all day. Why was it in his backpack? Where did he get it? "Jake, can you come downstairs?" I shouted from the kitchen. He didn't answer right away, but after a couple minutes, he appeared in the doorway. As soon as he walked in, I noticed him tense up. He sat at the table with his hands folded in front of him and looked at me like he knew the conversation was going to be unpleasant. "Is something wrong?" he asked, a look of indifference on his face, but concern in his eyes. I sighed and laid the picture on the table in front of him. "Do you want to explain how you got it?" Jake looked at the picture, and his face darkened. He remained silent, his lips pressed together. I was beginning to lose my patience. "It's from your backpack, Jake," Do you know who this man is? Do you know why this picture is here? I questioned, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, I do, he said, looking me in the eye. Good. Then explain it to me. He stood up and pushed his chair away abruptly. Are you serious? You think I don't know what's going on? You spend your whole life pretending to do everything for me, and then I find out that you... He stopped talking before he could finish. I was confused. His words weren't just an accusation. They hit me where it hurt. I knew he was talking about my affair. But how did he know? Jake, it's not what you think. It was a long time ago. I started, but he interrupted. A long time ago? Uh-huh. You think that makes me feel better? You think I didn't see you joking around with him? How you were his... He stopped, but I knew he saw something. My breath hitched. He'd clearly witnessed something I wasn't going to reveal to him or anyone else. You can't be mad at me for this. You're just a kid. You don't understand, I said. But the words clearly only made him angrier. I'm not a child. He gritted his teeth and walked out of the room, slamming his bedroom door loudly. I sat alone. All I could think about were his words and the way he was looking at me. How much does he know? And most importantly, how could I make this right? The next day, Jake avoided me as much as he could. He even refused breakfast, grabbing his backpack and slamming the door. I just sighed, deciding to give him some time. But by late afternoon, it was clear I couldn't take it. The silence in the house was crushing. When Jake returned, I worked up the courage to knock on his door. Jake, we need to talk. About what? You know everything. His voice sounded annoyed, but without the teenage intensity of yesterday. I went into the room. He was sitting on the bed, staring at his phone, but his face was tense. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to look at him too closely, so I wouldn't push him. Look, I get that you're angry, and you have a right to be, I started, trying to find the words. But I want to explain. You want to explain why you lied to me? Or why you betrayed Dad? He suddenly put the phone away and looked at me straight on. His question hurt, but I knew he was expecting honesty. Jake, I never meant to deceive you. I'm not proud of what I had either. But this is, it's harder than you think. I looked away. He only grinned. More complicated? Is it? Because all I see is you pretending to be the perfect mom, and in reality, he stammered. But I could see he was in pain. I took a deep breath. I hadn't been happy. Not for a long time. Your father. We just weren't the right people to be together anymore. And I made a mistake. I started a relationship while I was still married. It was wrong. Jake listened silently, but his gaze was heavy. You don't think I understand. I saw you. That time you said you went to a friend's house. I came home early. My heart sank to the bottom. He really knew. All along. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, feeling terrible. Because I didn't know how. You're always so confident, so in control. And I thought, you know that you'd at least be honest with me. I sat there in silence. His words stung. Jake, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this. I was just trying to deal with it the best I could. But I'm still your mom. You always come first for me, I said, feeling my voice start to shake. Then prove it, he said quietly, standing up. No more secrets. No more for your own good stories. I nodded. It was the only way I could somehow regain his trust. But I knew it was going to be hard ahead. After talking to Jake, I sat in his room for a long time, going over in my head everything that had brought us to this moment. When I came out, he had his headphones on and was watching something on his tablet, as if shutting himself off from the world. I couldn't blame him. When I'd first started an affair with Dan, that was the name of the man in the picture. It had been like a breath of air. Jake was younger, my marriage was falling apart, and I felt like a robot. I worked, cooked, took care of the house, but I barely existed. Dan was the opposite of my ex-husband. Easygoing, charming, but as it turned out later, temporary. He filled a void but provided no support. By the time I realized this, my marriage was finally cracking at the seams. I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing when I left my husband, that at least I was free of a burdensome relationship. But Jake apparently never saw it that way. The next day, I found him in the garage. He was fixing his bike, carefully avoiding my gaze. "Jake, can I talk to you?" I asked, stepping gingerly closer. "You've already told me everything." He kept fiddling with the wheels, but I saw him sigh. "Yeah, but I think there's something else you should know." He stopped and looked at me. "It's not your fault what that picture found. And it's not my fault that I made mistakes. That was between me and your father. But I know you're in this situation because of us." Jake looked at me in surprise. I just don't understand why you did it. Did you really feel that bad?" I nodded. "Yes. And it's not an excuse, but it's true. People do stupid things when they feel broken. I'm not making excuses for you. I just want you to know it wasn't because of you." Jake fell silent. He fiddled with his bike in silence for a few minutes, and then he asked, "Are you happy now?" That question caught me off guard. "I don't know, Jake, but I'm trying." He nodded, as if accepting that answer, and went back to his work. It may have been a small step, but I knew it was an important one. A few weeks passed, and the tension in the house began to ease. Jake still wasn't as open as he used to be, but at least he was talking to me. That's already a lot of progress for a teenager. One evening, I got home from work a little later than usual. The house was quiet, with only the sound of some podcast coming from Jake's room. I put a pot of pasta on the stove, and before I could even boil the water, I heard his footsteps behind me. "Mom, can I ask you a question?" I turned around. He was standing there, rubbing the drawstring of his sweatshirt. Sure. Do you really think I come first?" The question came out of the blue, but I knew he'd been preparing for it for a long time. "Jake, you have always been and will always be the most important thing to me. I realize that my actions have sometimes said otherwise, but it's true." He bit his lip, thinking, "If you could go back, would you fix it?" That question made me freeze. Would I really want everything back, including my marriage to his father, or even avoid having an affair with Dan? I don't know, Jake. Maybe there are some things I wish I'd done differently, but then I wouldn't be who I am. And honestly, I don't want to pretend that everything was perfect. "That's not true," I said, sitting down at the table. "What I do know is that I'm trying to be better for you." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Well, I guess we could try to start over." My heart shook. "I'd really like that." He smiled, a little stiffly but warmly. "Just no secrets. I promise." That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were becoming family again. Maybe not perfect, but real. And that's all I need right now.